Okay, hi everyone. My name's Kathy and I'm one of the directors from Thrive Aged Care Consultants. And today I'm really excited to be speaking with Steve Hunt, who is the CEO and founder of Music Health. So hi, Steve.
Hi, Kathy. Thanks so much for having me on.
Oh, thank you for coming. Now, today, the reason that we're chatting is it is International Day of the Older Person, and the theme for this year is resilience of older persons in a changing world. And there is a big focus on improving the use or encouraging the use of digital technology for older people. So, who better to talk to about a form of technology and specifically music technology than Steve? So, Steve, you've done a lot of work around music, which I won't go into because I'll let you talk about it. But yeah, music has big impacts on everyone. I know myself, I use it every day, and I've certainly used it with clients and residents that I've cared for before and seen huge benefits. But I'm really keen to hear from you about your background and your understanding of music and memory and the impacts that it has.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, firstly, I think it's a really excellent theme that they've chosen because there's so much benefit that can be gathered from things that are being delivered digitally. But if you don't have the mechanism to be able to receive them, then you're missing out. And so I know my grandmother lived to the age of 100, and she experienced dementia towards the end of that journey.
Mm-hmm.
And she was very determined to keep up with changes in technology. And so, she adopted email around about the time that we were all getting onto it, and learned how to type on a computer instead of a typewriter, and was very adamant, even towards the end, about streaming movies instead of watching videos, and was just felt very passionate about all of the things that those new technologies empowered her to be able to do and empowered her to experience. But of course, it's not as easy for everybody to make that digital jump. So I do applaud that that's the focus for this year. But yeah, my journey, I started, I guess, well, this particular journey started with my grandfather. He developed Alzheimer's when I was a teenager, and being a keen musician, I always played music for him, especially as he progressed into older years. My family would often say, "Oh, make sure you bring the guitar if you're coming up to visit, and play for your dad. He loves it." I had no idea why it made such a difference, but I learnt that later in my life, and it's really, really amazing, particularly for people with dementia, that when you stimulate the long-term memory with music, the musical memories are far less impacted than other memories like names and faces. And when you actually stimulate those memories, it sets off a chain reaction in the brain that, if you look at it on an fMRI scan, it's kind of the equivalent of Christmas lights turning on. Like, it's quite magical. And visual, if you're looking at it on those brain scan mechanisms like an fMRI. What's really happening is, the vibrations in air that music are being interpreted by the ears. It's crossing through the auditory system, jumping across the hemispheres of the brain to the other side. And we actually coordinate lots of different parts of the brain to interpret what we feel and what we hear as music. You think about it, music is rhythm, timbre, key, melody, but then often lyrics. And all of these different things are processed in different ways. But when the harmony, pardon the pun, of it all comes together in your brain, we experience it as music. So there's been some really great research, which you could look up, from the University of Toronto. And they talk about it as being a brain workout, but they actually found that regular listening to precision music, which is a definition that means it's personalized to the individual but can shift their emotional state. Regular listening actually delayed cognitive decline. So it was, and we kind of look at that and we infer that that potentially means that it can help to maybe even prevent some of the cognitive issues that we see. So this idea of stimulating the memory, stimulating the brain on a regular basis, it starts to promote neuroplasticity. And they also proved that there was neuroplasticity within dementia patients, even at a very late stage, that was being stimulated by this personalized music. So lots of really, really interesting stuff going on, but that's the basic science of it. Is we stimulate that long-term memory, it sets off the chain reaction in the brain, lots of brain stimulation, and that person is much more likely to remember names and faces in front of them, much better control of fine and gross motor skills, much more likely to remain calm and less frightened because they kind of understand who they are and they feel a more familiar environment. So many benefits.
Wow. Well, that makes a lot of sense to me now, because I've definitely used it. I used to run a program for people living with dementia, and we used music quite a lot. And you could just see the change in people's mood, and you could see them engage more in whatever activities we were doing. And we've also worked with carers in the community that were having challenges working with someone living with dementia. And, you know, providing hygiene care, for example. So, yeah, working with them and talking about the types of music that client liked in particular. And it was a complete 360 and a much better experience for the client and for the carer and for the family member as well, because she went from being very resistive and scared, obviously having a stranger come in providing care to her, but, you know, developing that rapport with the music and conversation and singing, and, you know, the experience was completely different. So that's amazing.
Yeah, and we see that a lot, because I guess what we do as a company is we try to empower that caregiver to play the right music at the right time for the right care. And so hygiene care is actually a very, very common use case that when we started this journey, I was like, I had no idea that would be a thing. But it is. And it's quite incredible that, you know, we often hear stories of people dancing into the shower, for example, who often would otherwise be very resistant to wanting to, well, take their clothes off in the first place. But we see it used to help people get out of bed, very commonly paired with physical activity and even physiotherapy. Because again, if we're in that brain stimulated state and there's better control of fine and gross motor skills, guess what? Physiotherapy is going to be more effective too. And then eating. So again, if we think about those fine and gross motor skills, we're using our hand to maybe coordinate utensils or pick up food, but then to chew and to masticate that food and then to be able to swallow. All those things, again, enhanced. So in the hospital settings, we're finding that's actually a really common use case. So putting on music before feeding helps to make the feeding more successful, particularly in people in later stages who they're finding it more difficult to make sure that they actually get the food they require. But then, of course, you know, you'll find music is can be very helpful. It's on a case by case, but with those changing behaviours and or particularly towards the end of the day when, you know, maybe things are starting to become a little bit more difficult or more stressful, music can be a great antidote to that.
Yeah. Wow, amazing. So how did your product is called Vera. So tell us more about Vera and how that came about.
Yeah. So the product itself, I suppose I'll tell you the journey of it and then I'll tell you how we found the name. So I'm a serial entrepreneur. My first startup was a not-for-profit focused on HIV/AIDS education, and it still runs today. It's called Red Aware these days. And I kind of moved on from that into a career in media for my sins. Online advertising, particularly focused on video advertising. And I went through a couple of startups in that journey. And the most recent one was sold to Adobe. So it's now called the Adobe Advertising Cloud. And after I got through with that journey, I kind of decided, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? And I was, you know, music was such a big passion for me from a young age. So I wanted to go back and focus on that. And I ended up getting a job at Universal Music Group here in Sydney as their managing director, and focused on emerging technology and media and content. And within that purview, it was really trying to look at the digital transformation of the business. How do we kind of center the business around data and insights and then create better content? But there were lots of kind of experiments going on and discussions about where we thought the opportunities were in the future. And we were looking at AI technologies and whether they were opportunities or threats. But one thing in particular that I really found fascinating was this interest in music and healthcare. And there was this kind of idea that music has been involved in every ancient human civilization's healing practice. So look at the Indigenous people of Australia, the didgeridoo is actually one of the oldest forms of music therapy we know of. And Aztecs, Incas, ancient Greeks, like you name it, music is part of healing. And if you think about it, even a mother of any culture will instinctively soothe her child by singing or humming a melody, whether she's had any musical training or not. So it's kind of human nature to heal with music, but we just don't do it anymore. You know, music therapy is an allied health profession, but it's quite small, and there's a very low supply for the incredible demand for it. There's clearly this opportunity for music to be interwoven into healthcare more broadly, and we saw that at the record label, but you know, there was no real solution to that. And then while I was there, I met my co-founder, Nick, who was one of the world leaders in applying AI technologies, and particularly something called a neural network to audio. And so he developed something called the AI music brain that could listen to music and interpret it like a human would. And
Wow.
I found that really, really fascinating. And we became good friends. And then he kind of, after I'd left there, I set up an incubator for music startups, and Nick had sort of come to me and said, "Hey, I've got this awesome idea to take all the work I've done, but deploy it to people living with dementia." And he showed me a film that had inspired that called Alive Inside, which is really worth a watch. It follows, you know, the story of a man called Dan Cohen in the US who goes and researches and creates personalized music for people with dementia, puts it on iPods. It's very manual, but the change in them was so visual and so immediate, and so profound. It was very moving. And I kind of said to Nick, I think this is incredible. Like, you're onto something here. And we could see that with a digital approach, going back to the theme here, we could see that we could make it much easier for someone to get that right music and to be able to benefit from it without, you know, hours of research and manual uploading of songs and things like that. So we kind of set about trying to prove that, and we did some research, thanks to Dementia Australia, who actually provided some funding, and that demonstrated we could lift quality of life by 17% in 2 weeks. So it was quite a big lift. And we asked, you know, was that any good? And were told that, well, if that was a pharmaceutical drug trial, you would be on the front of the New York Times.
Amazing.
So we said, okay, that sounds good. And then we went about trying to productize that prototype, and yeah, we needed a name. And so Vera came about because we wanted something that was an ode to the singers of yesteryear. So we actually thought about Billie for Billie Holiday. That was another idea. Vera was an ode to Vera Lynn. But there were a few other key requirements. So the name also had to be able to, I guess sonically, it had to be something that could be easily said, because we did foresee a world where people would use their voice to command for it. So, hey, I want to listen to the Relax playlist on Vera. You know,
wow.
Be something that could be easily said and easily listened to by a voice-controlled device. And then lastly, we wanted to see if we could find a URL and all those other elements, and, you know, and if we kind of liked it. But there were a few other things that got Vera over the line. I believe it's in Spanish, it means to see, and in Italian, it's truth. And there were a few other nice little things that we kind of went, okay, feeling like this
fits
is
nicely,
and it was quite funny because Nick had already named the company, as we kind of cemented it as Music Health, which, you know, I never really weighed in on that decision. I just kind of went along with it. And at the time I kind of thought, well, it's kind of, I mean, I guess it's saying what we do on the tin, but it's kind of boring. But it's funny that as you go forward, like these things kind of just become a brand, and it's what you breathe into them, and that is what they become. So it almost doesn't matter what you call anything, I've kind of realized. But yeah, but that's how we came about to the journey, and that's how Vera was named.
Amazing. And so who uses Vera at the moment?
Yeah,
Who
good
should
question.
access it? Yeah.
That's also changed. So the joy of a startup is that you make assumptions, and then you
Yep.
try to prove those assumptions, and sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong. And our first assumption when we were doing that research actually was that this would be used by people at home. So we
Mm-hmm.
thought, yeah, everyone's going to love using it, and to this day you still can use it at home. But we tended to find that when we went to find customers, that they already had music at home, of course, and it was a hard sell for us to first of all convince them that music could be therapeutic, because they didn't have any clinical training, they didn't understand the science or the background, and it was a bit like, I always tell people, it's a bit like meditation before Headspace came along. Like,
Yep.
you know, if you asked most people in the general population if they would ever meditate, they'd go, hell no, that's for hippies. You know,
Yeah.
they didn't really believe it was anything.
Yeah.
And I feel like music and music therapy, or music as a therapy, is probably a little bit the same. Some people will acknowledge that there's something there, but few people will believe that it can be truly therapeutic. And so there's a big job to change that. But then secondly, if we could convince them, then they would say, but why do I need this device? And why do I need your solution when I've got CDs or I've got the radio? And so we kind of backed off from that area a little bit and thought, we probably don't have the right solution for them just yet. And we kind of determined that the day we could come back to them with something that was more like a scheduling tool that would guide them through their daily routine, and music just happened to be part of that experience, that would be more relevant. And so we're still working on that. But when we did the research, that was in a aged care facility, and residential aged care down in Barossa Village. And that was really quite interesting, because they kind of said, well, the way you've built this, we need an iPad for every person who's going to be in the study. And we went, oh yeah, that's a bit of a bummer.
Yeah.
So we actually called Apple, and they lent us iPads for the research, which was incredible of them. But we solved that problem temporarily. And then they said, oh, and they all need an email address for your system. So we're going to have to make up fake ones, because they don't have email addresses, most of the people in our care. We're like, oh, okay. Yeah, we definitely didn't get that right either. And then we kind of, everything else worked fine. We got great results, but we kind of came back to them afterwards and said, we think we should build you a new product that is for your particular use. And they gave us lots of really good feedback on designs, and we developed Vera Pro. And we actually also involved in the development journey Hammond Care and Bupa. And so we were working with some of their experts, and again, sending designs and ideas of what it needed to be. And with Vera Pro, from one device, you can create as many profiles as you like. And most of the time, what happens is we use one of these Vera Pro accounts per ward, per floor, or per cottage, depending on your model. And whatever group of people are being cared for together go into the one sort of user experience. And then you can change who you're playing music to as you go around and do your work as a caregiver. So we really, I guess that was the other big realization. We realized that the user is actually the caregiver. It's not necessarily the person listening. And then we actually started to build everything around the ADLs. And how could we actually use the music to improve care outcomes? And then the last thing that we led to was that we also acknowledged that a lot of the listening would happen in a group environment, but that those groups might change depending on whether the activity was exercise or whether it was just relaxing for the day or eating. And so we built a capability called group listening, where the caregiver can just tick the people who are in that Vera Pro account that are together, and then hit play, and it'll play music that they have in common.
Oh,
So,
wow.
that's actually quite a newish feature. But so our primary users today are residential aged care facilities and also hospitals, who are actually our fastest adopting segment. And in the hospitals, we're finding that, they love it. They are, and they're very, very quick to adopt and become super users. So it's really, really exciting to kind of see what's happening within hospitals. But that's where we're focused, on those two elements. And then we're starting to do a little bit of experimentation, going back to people who have been cared for at home or who are going through transition care, but we're doing it through trusted providers. So again, overcoming that first obstacle of, why would I need to use music for, therapeutic sense? It's very different if it's coming from their care consultant or someone like that, who is saying, you should use this. This is going to help. And then it's going to be incredibly beneficial through the transition and into residential aged care. So that's kind of where we've ended up.
Amazing. So it would be a really beneficial product for maybe people who have got a new diagnosis of dementia, and or anybody really, but if you've got a new diagnosis of dementia and understanding the impacts and the effects, it's something that could be, really beneficial establishing early on.
That's right. Yeah. And we've because we've been going now for the company's about 3 years old, but we've had the product for about 1.5 years, and we have had lots of customers who've been on the journey for quite a while. So we've seen the benefit of using it in transition care, but we've also seen the benefit in the later stages where we move into palliative care, and having that personalized music that person has grown accustomed to every day can be incredibly comforting at that stage. So we're really kind of excited about where things will go into the future. But yeah, Vera, it's designed, as I said, for that caregiver. And I'd probably say that's the best qualification as to whether you think you would want to use it or not is, are you being cared for by somebody? And if you're at that stage and they're not too sure what music to play for that person, then that's really where Vera can come in and provide a huge amount of support, make it really, really simple and easy.
Amazing. Oh, that sounds amazing. Like I say, I love using music, and all of the features of your product sound fantastic, and something that I wish I had when I was working, indirectly in resi care. But I'm sure that there are lots of people out there that would be interested in hearing more from you about music and your product in particular. So how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, they can come to the website, which is www.veramusic.com, so VERAMUSIC. And then if they want to get in touch with me, come to the Music Health website, which is www.musichealth.ai, so MUSICHEALTH. And yeah, you can just sort of hit up a form there, and most of the time it ends up in my lap. Yeah, but either one, it'll probably get to me depending on what you're trying to do. But there's lots of information on the Vera website, and you can also go and do a free trial of the at-home product. So that can be a really good way just to get an idea of the basics of what it can do. And then if there's interest in Vera Pro, if you're in that kind of proper, residential aged care or hospital setting, we come and sort of work with you on what the commercials need to look like for your particular setting.
Amazing. Oh, well, we're all about encouraging and helping people to thrive, no matter their age, but particularly older people and people living with dementia. So it's been great catching up with you, Stephen. Thank you for giving us your time.
Thanks for having me on. It was really fun.
Yeah, awesome. I'll speak to you soon.
Bye.
Thank you.